Chapter 2. The Litigation Star and Grand Duke Jupiter. Alas, our people! Civilization, what a disaster! Police against police, the police issue fines. After crossing a completely deserted courtyard, the policeman led red-haired Xuân and the elderly fortune teller to a small room, turned the key in the lock, and said with honeyed sarcasm, "After you, gentlemen." Inside the cell were an old beggar with his wife and child, a tramp, and a female street vendor whose 2 baskets of grilled pork noodles had gone unsold. The woman sat against the wall, hugging her knees between the baskets, her face deeply contemplative. The tramp lay stretched out on the tiled floor, snoring like a saw cutting through timber, while the 3 members of the begging family picked lice from one another with almost poetic tenderness. The door slammed shut, the lock clicked. The boots of the chief constable gradually faded into the distance. A feeble lamp burned red, casting a gloomy half-light across the room. The old fortune teller placed his wooden case, mat, and umbrella on the floor, then sat on the case, panting for breath. Red-haired Yuan remained standing. Scratching his ribs with both hands, he looked haughtily at the other prisoners and surveyed the cell with complete indifference. Curling his lip, he said, "What a bloody country! Some police station this is. The cell's no bigger than a nostril. Absolutely shameless." The fortune teller widened his eyes. "What the hell's that got to do with me?" Red-haired Xuân immediately explained to everyone, Hey, what's that stink for? I wasn't talking about you. I meant the government." What he intended, of course, was to express his contempt for the prison. This particular establishment was merely a small police post belonging to the city's 18th precinct, newly established not long before. Its entire staff consisted of only 7 people, 1 French commissaire, 1 Vietnamese interpreter, 1 police supervisor, and 4 constables. The post was responsible for 16 streets, all of them European streets, some several kilometers long, and every one of them peaceful. Consequently, whenever the officers managed to catch and fine a group of offenders, they rejoiced as though they had won the grand prize in a lottery. The 4 constables had to take turns cycling around all 16 streets. After only 6 months, they had become 4 first-rate racing cyclists. 1 had won the Hanoi Haipong race. Others had come 3rd or 4th in the Hanoi Sontai race, the Hanoi Bac Ninh race, the Tour of Hanoi, and so on. On the unfortunate occasions when something did disturb public order in those 16 streets, the policemen were usually nowhere to be seen. Street vendors, houseboys, cooks, rickshaw pullers, and beggars waited until the policemen had lowered their heads and pedaled out of the street before urinating in public, fighting, or cursing one another. Since there were only 4 constables, 2 always had to remain at the station, leaving only 2 to patrol the streets. 16 streets for 2 men. The work of maintaining public order had become little more than bicycle racing practice. That year, owing to the economic crisis and the exhaustion of the budget, the Grand Economic and Financial Council of Indochina approved a bill requiring the police to collect 40,000 piastres in fines from the city's inhabitants. The Central Police Administration assigned this branch the task of collecting 5,000 piastres, 1/8 of the total sum. The French commissaire had torn at his hair until it stood on end and twisted his mustache almost out of shape. In those 16 streets, the only enemies available to be fined were a handful of houseboys, cooks, rickshaw pullers, and street vendors. Everyone else was French. How could he possibly collect the full 5,000 piastres? At last, the commissaire summoned the station staff to a secret meeting. After the meeting, everyone was filled with admiration for the ingenious solution they had devised. The employees began moving their entire families into the district covered by those 16 streets, and then it began. First, the French commissaire himself was fined for allowing his dog to run loose in the street, or because Madame Commissaire had forgotten to tell the houseboy to sweep the house in accordance with hygiene regulations. Next came the families of the interpreter, the police supervisor, and the 4 constables, followed by the office orderly and the road worker responsible for tending the station's little public garden. They were fined for urinating in the street, quarreling, riding bicycles without lamps, failing to keep their houses sanitary, and so forth. The employees of the police post began issuing fines against one another with wild abandon, as though they were mortal enemies seeking revenge. That day, the French commissaire was typing out an important report when a constable rushed in to report a burglary at a Frenchman's house. The burglary had occurred the previous night, but the owner had only just discovered it. The commissaire said despondently in French, "A burglar has to be handed over to the court. There'll be no fine to collect." He then told the police supervisor to take charge while he went out with the interpreter. Left alone in the office, the supervisor yawned like a merchant during an economic depression. When a man passed by, he called him over and asked gloomily, "Tell me, Constable Mildup, are you feeling miserable?" The constable nodded like a drunken Confucian scholar who had grown weary of life. "Very miserable, sir. So miserable that I simply want to die." The supervisor groaned. "We have been fined far too often." Constable Mildew repeated sorrowfully, "That is true. We have indeed been fined far too often. The public budget estimates require money, but our 16 streets require more Vietnamese residents. Do you miss the old days, 10 years ago? Very much. 10 years ago, our people were still ignorant. Nowadays, our people have become civilized. What a tragedy. You must remember how society used to be filled with hooligans, hired thugs, and uncivilized people. They relieved themselves everywhere. They fought everywhere. Sometimes 4 people would sit in the same vehicle. They would curse one another for half an hour and fight until their heads were split open. Their homes overflowed with rubbish, sewage, and filthy water. Their dogs ran freely through the streets. Bicycles carried extra passengers or traveled without lamps everywhere you looked. But now everything has changed. The glorious age of our ancestors is gone. What a calamity! Alas! Exactly, sir. Even the rickshaw pullers know the law nowadays. They never forget their lamps. They hardly ever stand arrogantly in the middle of the road. Almost nobody curses another person's ancestors back through 5 or 10 generations anymore. All the fine traditions of our society have vanished. Even the children are no longer as badly behaved as they used to be. Every one of them is neatly and respectably dressed, terribly civilized, climbing tamarind and so trees, playing football in the middle of the street. All that has disappeared. The very existence of newspapers is absurd. Precisely, it is because of the newspapers that the people have become civilized, leaving us with fewer opportunities to find them. So instead of being the police who find people, we have become the police who get fined. Oh, that is an unforgivable contradiction. We are policemen. And I am a police supervisor, sir. Sapristi. Truly, were it not for the occasional bicycle race, one might say that the curtain was slowly descending upon our lives. And if the newspapers did not occasionally print our names and photographs on the front page, their behavior would be utterly unforgivable. So, will you be entering the Hanoi Ha Jong race next Sunday? Of course. Just think, 4 journeys a day around 16 streets without encountering a single offense worth recording, without even an excuse to stop and rest. That is more than enough training for any racetrack. It would be a waste not to compete. But, Supervisor, the advancement of our people is no reason for us to keep targeting one another's families and issuing fines against them. That figure of 5,000 piastres in the budget estimates is meaningless. I object. The supervisor sprang up in alarm, waving his hands. Good heavens, be careful, or you'll be guilty of disobeying orders. Just ask the French wife of the commissaire. She cheerfully paid nearly 20 piastres in fines last month without making the slightest complaint. The constable remained indignant. In that case, my only choice is to divorce my wife. Good heavens, why? I told her that from time to time she should make the children scatter so fruit about the street, or let the house become properly filthy, or allow the drains to overflow, so that Constable Milletroit would occasionally have something to fine us for. Then I would have an opportunity to fine his wife in return. But instead, she keeps my children as well behaved as saints, and the house scrubbed and polished until it shines. The wretch, the wicked woman. Faced with such a difficult domestic situation, the supervisor did not dare offer an opinion. To change the subject, he told the constable to go down to the temporary cell and bring the prisoners up for questioning. Constable Mildew opened the cell door just as red-haired Xuan and the fortune teller were engaged in a furious argument. "That's what you get for being so stubborn," the fortune teller shouted. "You got yourself arrested. I don't care, because this month the Litigation Star and Grand Duke Jupiter are troubling my fate. I am destined to suffer delays and wait wearily at the doors of government offices. Being arrested like this is nothing serious. It will soon pass. I don't care either, and I'm not boasting, but since heaven and earth first brought me into this world, this must be at least the 15th time I've been dragged to a police station. You assaulted an old man. You'll go to prison for that." Ignoring him, red-haired Xuan continued without drawing breath. "And in the old days, I used to get arrested and taken to the main police station, a huge, magnificent place that made your hair stand on end. 7 or 8 commissaries with enormous mustaches, their chests covered in medals, every one of them carrying a revolver. There were hundreds of police sergeants with white-painted clubs, carrying enormous chains. And the depot had iron bars like tiger cages, full of mosquitoes and bed bugs, with enough room to hold several hundred prisoners. But getting arrested and brought to this tiny station, with a cell no bigger than a nostril, and room for only a handful of people. What the hell kind of country is this?" The constable shouted, "Out! All of you out! Come and be questioned. Shut your mouths. How long are you going to keep arguing?" Apart from the tramp, who was still lying on the floor and snoring like thunder, everyone stood up. The constable had to nudge the tramp with his foot. The man muttered, "Be quiet and let people sleep." "Are you getting up or not? I'll drag you up by the neck." The tramp sat up, bewildered. "Sir, get out." He rose to his feet, grumbling. "I was sleeping in the street, so they arrested me and brought me to the station. Then I was sleeping in the station, and they woke me up and told me to leave. What a lot of unnecessary fuss." The prisoners left the cell, crossed the courtyard, and entered the office. Seeing that red-haired Xuan was the best dressed among them, in western trousers, rubber shoes, and a sleeveless undershirt, the supervisor questioned him first. "You there! What is your offense?" The fortune teller immediately accused him. "Your Honor, he struck me." Red-haired Xuan protested. "I didn't strike him. I only meant to strangle him. He punched me twice, very painfully, and then grabbed me by the throat. I hadn't punched him, and I hadn't even had time to strangle him before the old man started screaming." The supervisor struck the desk. "Silence! Silence at once. Let me ask the questions. Who was right? Who was wrong? How did it begin? You there, why did you attack him? Explain yourself." "Your Honor, That good-for-nothing old fraud cheated me out of a dime. He told my fortune, got everything wrong, and then refused to return my money. I only wanted to pin him down and recover it. I never intended to hit him. The supervisor turned to the fortune teller. Did you read his fortune? Did you accept 1 dime from him? Your Honor, I charged him only 1 dime for preparing his horoscope. That was already very cheap. Every prediction I made was correct. And yet, he still demanded his money back. Every word was wrong, Your Honor. He said my future was going to be wonderful, but the moment he finished telling my fortune, I lost my job. The supervisor glared at the fortune teller. You made a prediction like that and still demanded payment? Your Honor, the future means what will happen later, not what happens at that very moment. I have studied the science of destiny for 10 years. My predictions are as accurate as those of gods and saints. How could I ever be wrong? And Your Honor has never allowed me to read your fortune. So how can Your Honor accuse me of making false predictions? The supervisor turned and glared at red-haired Xuân. He has a point, doesn't he? The fortune teller immediately continued. One only has to look at Your Honor's features. Your career palace is excellent. When you speak, flames seem to leap from your mouth. Your eyebrows extend beyond your eyes. You have many brothers, and your earlobes hang like pearls. In the latter part of your life, you will become extremely rich. The supervisor glared at red-haired Xuân once more. You see, he predicts very well. All right, fine this man. You are guilty of assaulting someone, and an elderly person at that. The fine is 1.80. Release the fortune teller immediately. Now, let me see the identification papers of the next person. The sound of a motor car stopping could be heard outside. Madame Deputy Douane entered, smiling coyly as she greeted the 2 representatives of the state. Both men welcomed her with the enthusiasm of shopkeepers receiving a wealthy customer. Madame Deputy Douane frequently allowed her dog to run loose in the street and had accumulated more fines than almost anyone else in the 16th Street district. The police post was therefore as grateful to her as a struggling business would be to a loyal customer. The supervisor asked, "What can we do for you, madame? We are entirely at your service." "Oh, I have come to pay the fine for one of my people. There he is. Please release him." The supervisor rubbed his hands together. Constable Ch.2 said, "Certainly, madame. You may pay the fine immediately." "How much is it?" 1.80. Constable Ch.2 sat down at the desk to write out the receipt. Red-haired Xuân stared in astonishment, unable to understand what was happening. Respectfully, he asked, "Madame, why are you being so kind to me?" "Oh, you will soon find out. We have a use for you. Just go back to the house and everything will be explained. You have a job now." The old fortune teller broke in. "There, you see? And you said I was wrong." Red-haired Xuân turned towards him. "You were right after all. You're a living saint. Please accept my apologies." Madame Deputy Douane asked, "What is this about?" "Madame, this fortune teller is extraordinarily gifted." "Is that so? Then he can get into the car as well and come home to read my fortune. Come along." The receipt was finished, and Madame Deputy Douane paid the money. The fortune teller returned to the cell to collect his equipment, then came back out and climbed into the car with Xuân and Madame Deputy Douane. The supervisor accompanied them all the way to the gate and said, "Thank you very much. We hope you will favor us with your patronage again." Only after saying this did he suddenly remember, somewhat embarrassed, that this was a police station, not his wife's French bakery. Chapter 2 ends here, and see you in Chapter 3.